Hi, and welcome back to the show. Okay, so I'm gonna do something a little experimental for myself, which is telling allegories as a vehicle for my further opinions and analysis that I'll be sharing later. It might be really bad and unfunny, but it'll help with the boring stuff that comes later. Okay, so bad person bit number 1. Do you know those commercials that are like, if you use Roundup after 1990 and have one of these diseases, B-cell lymphoma, T-cell lymphoma, hair cell lymphoma, etc., then call our offices to get compensation. I've always wondered how it felt like to be one of those people. Like, you're just sitting there with your B or T or hair cell, watching TV, being sad, I guess, when this ad pops up and you're like, ah, hell yeah. Or for like half a second, your brain will be like, damn, I wish I had that disease so that I could get some money, But then I'm like, no, that's horrible. These people are probably in a lot of pain and getting a small fortune. That little external reward probably helps for a little while, but you still have to deal with your physical pain and all the other conditions that come with your disease. And that's the joke. But seriously, that was horrible because, yeah, that was a bad joke, but it comes from a real place, and it shows that money is really ingrained in my brain, even though I know it's not real. And it shows how capable I am of being cruel in a way to others and myself. This is true possibly with many other people. More importantly, this also shows how the carelessness of corporations leads to disease, which leaves people in debt and in pain who need to pay for drugs and medical fees. It's saying you could solve situations by just handing out money instead of promising to change things to prevent this from happening again, as well as giving money, which does help, and I don't mean to undermine the labor of the people representing the victims, but it doesn't criticize or expose the structural elements of our society to do just that. Of course, you can't blame everything on the external world, but if your daily life has you constantly thinking that everything around you sucks, then I say it's okay to be critical of your environment and contemplate its causes and consequences and maybe take action. I know this is just an allegory from one person, but historically, capitalist labor relations have not been and are not the most humane, to say the very least. And that is not even getting into all the anti-labor practices that major corporations like Amazon and Coca-Cola exercise on a daily basis, which are just modern examples out of the long history of these economic, social, legal, and political structures. I could do a whole episode or article or whatever on anti-union practices in Amazon alone. But it is possible to not internalize the alienating relations our jobs put us in if we do the work in fighting that by being welcoming to ourselves and others. I also had this other story about where I work and how I would feel the symptoms of alienation because of the conditions of the workplace and how I feel exploited and stuff. But it got me thinking about the concept of workplace democracy. I cannot say that I have any solutions to this, but something that would make me feel better in my own workplace would be having more autonomy and ownership in the place I spend my best days laboring. I guess a greater sense of democracy in the workplace is what I'm looking for. I'm not an economist, but having power over what happens in my own space and getting a fair share of the sales made are some examples that I can think of that would be great and appreciated by me and many other workers. However, capitalists will not allow this because changing the workplace to be more democratic in fundamental and significant ways and letting this happen across the country would mean eventually democratizing the economy and politics as well, which is something they do not want to happen. This is why they go to such far lengths to limit our sense of autonomy. Quote, "It follows that democracy and private property are largely incompatible, even when private property is exclusively vested in democratic firms." Unquote. Solis, 2019. Many economists, political scientists, and authors, from liberal to socialist, in related fields, agree that the workplace is especially undemocratic. Grady, in 1990, paraphrases theorist and writer Robert A. Dahl's 1985 argument when saying, he argues that the inalienability of property cannot be sustained because it conflicts with the more fundamental unalienable right, the right to self-governance. In other words, possession must be justified on instrumental grounds, that is, in terms of whether it enhances the right to self-governance. Now, it's not great to get into semantics about what is more unalienable, or even to use the word unalienable, but this statement highlights a contradiction between capitalist economy and real democracy. While I respect this and similar arguments, Grady and others fail in criticizing the liberal democracy of the state and private property as a whole by focusing only on the workplace. They are not challenging the hierarchy of capitalism, and thus not significantly challenging racism and poverty by promising to provide, quote, "a viable theory of workplace democracy that promises not a radical transformation of U.S. politics, but realizable adjustments to contemporary practices that are in keeping with pluralism and liberalism of the U.S. polity," unquote. Grady, 1990. To quote, "Workplace democracy implies economic democracy." Gold, 1988-2014, arrives at a defense of worker control from a premise about equal rights to the conditions of self-development. The idea is that if all have equal claims to the conditions of agency, then free agents have a right of self-determination or self-rule, which implies an equal right of co-determination concerning all common activities in which they engage, whether political or economic. Unquote. Solis, 2019. Solis, 2019 admits the need for a transitory stage to help with this contradiction, but realistically acknowledges the potential hazards in ideological transitions. Quote, "Socialists must therefore constantly wage a war on two fronts, quite independently of capital, against state officialdom on the one hand, and against technocracy on the other," unquote. He does offer some ideas for mitigation, such as ensuring that knowledge, especially skills and tacit knowledge, are shared as equally as possible through democratically elected managers, optional job rotation, and the full panoply of constitutional protections afforded by a pro-labor labor law. Solis, 2020. There's an idea sort of similar to this that comes up in a later study. There are a couple of studies on the effects of increasing workplace democracy, such as one done by Philip Melizzo, Jeffrey Carpenter, and Peter Hans Matthews in 2011, where they concluded that providing workers with voice in how they will be compensated increases their effort significantly, and the effects are not small, unquote. And, quote, "Obviously, this experiment is only a start, and there are a number of interesting and possible extensions," unquote. There's another study done by Camila Pinheiro Harnacker in 2007, who stated in her research on workplace democracy in Venezuela, quote, "The model of democratic management of enterprises by workers allows individuals in each working community to engage in the practice of democratic participation during production, and is therefore central to this model of human development," unquote. And, quote, "Cooperative members' motivation to participate in decision-making is relatively high, but creating this egalitarian environment has proven very difficult. The social division in cooperatives in this study mainly comes from the fact that, due to most members' scant enterprise management knowledge, accounting and administrative tasks generally remain among those few workers with some experience or higher educational levels. Most importantly, I found that success in eliminating these sources of inequality within cooperatives is tied to the willingness and effectiveness with which those knowledgeable members share their skills with the rest of the membership." Unquote. Of course, the conditions and skill of the workers will depend on the specific area you are in. And in this study, people in these democratic workplaces still had disagreements on things such as payment. The Venezuela case is also interesting because it features groups of people who were educated on citizenship and cooperatism, although many did not complete the program and some were rushed through it. The study emphasizes the link between participatory practice and collective consciousness, which is defined as an understanding of the interests of others in that community, followed by a disposition to contribute toward their realization. Harnacker, 2007. More on the challenges of workplace democracy in Venezuela. It is also clear that although the participatory experience has a straightforward educative or self-transformative effect on cooperative members, other factors prevent the full realization of its integrative effect. The emergence of a sense of community among the workers' collective is undercut by internal conflicts largely stemming from members' inexperience in social relations and administrative tasks, especially when mechanisms for collective monitoring are lacking. But I found that these clashes are only significant in cooperatives with a large membership, where participatory practice is also considerably limited. Harnacker, 2007. Although the study took place in Venezuela, where many people consider it socialist, Harnacker, 2007, comes to the consensus that capitalism, quote, undermines the implementation of genuine workplace democracy. Additionally, that capitalism undermines the development of members' collective consciousness. Harnacker also stresses the expansion of, quote, workers' self-interest beyond the frontiers of their workplaces by changing the logic of economic exchange and instituting mechanisms of coordination among themselves and with communities. Here's the last sentence of our 2007 study, Workplace Democracy and Collective Consciousness, an empirical study of Venezuelan cooperatives. Since people are capable of internalizing the interests of others with whom they interact, directly or indirectly, through a genuine participatory practice, workplace democracy, although critical, is not sufficient for this endeavor. The findings of this study suggest not only the feasibility of creating a society where human behavior is characterized by conscious solidarity, but also how to get us there. These are just a few ideas from some academics and researchers, and there's much more research to do, but more importantly, people to learn from. If you made it this far, thanks for listening. And if you feel like you have anything you want to share, or if you disagree with anything, do not mind doing that in the YouTube comments. This is all satire. Thanks again, and bye.